Hi everyone, welcome to the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. Join me as we explore approaches and orientations towards cultivating the physical body, the internal landscapes, the mind, and our relationship with reality as a whole. I'm your host, Craig Mallet. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been a little while. I kind of dropped the ball a bit in June because June was crazy busy for me, but I'm back and hoping to be a little bit more regular again for the coming weeks. This week on the podcast, I have my friend Jackson, and the conversation we had was really cool. It went actually way over time. I think we ended up closer to 2 hours with the timing rather than an hour like I usually try and stick around. But there were some really cool topics, and some of his insights were really landed with me, and I had to spend a bit of time digesting them after the podcast, and it's definitely going to influence a few things I did. Before we get into that, just a regular reminder that I do have a bunch of services available. So if you like the podcast and you like what I'm doing and you like to support me, then you can become a Patreon. My Patreon membership has a bunch of different tiers. They will give you access to all sorts of things like early access to this podcast. I do a practice of the week every single week, just about. I also put in bonus practices from time to time for the higher tier members. And you also get to support me and the work I'm doing, which I'd be immensely appreciative of. The other thing I have going on besides that are my online courses. I'm just in the process of finishing a new course at the moment, so I'm editing that today. It'll probably take a little while to edit, maybe a week or so, because there are a lot of videos in there and there are lots of little finicky things to do behind the scenes before I can launch it. But that program is going to be about releasing through the legs. So just to give you a bit of an overview about these programs, I'm kind of breaking them up into all sorts of different topics. So I've got already available a program on Wuji, which is standing in a centered position. And that's all about getting this opening and releasing process going. So it's about what the intent is doing inside the exercise, not the exercise in particular. We're just using a static posture the whole time. But there's a lot of details there, and that will get you set up with a good base to do all the rest from. After that, I have a program for shoulders where we'll work on releasing and connecting the shoulders through the back with a lot of arm swings and things like this. This is great for not only just general fitness, but if you really want to get into the internal arts, shoulders are really a big key to it all, to connect the arms to the torso. I've got a program for the deep hip, which is called the quad. And this is all about articulating through the quad and getting it free and open and learning how to drive movement from there and so on and so forth. And I've got a breathing program at the moment. The program I am doing, releasing through the legs, is really about how to take that connection developed in the quad program and bring it down to the foot. So it's a lot to do with how to release weight down the legs in spirals and things like this, how to open up the different passageways in the legs to make sure they're all clear and accessible. And part of that means waking up the legs and strengthening all the weak links and all of that. So it'll be a lot of sinking through the legs. It's a big leg day program, but it does incredible things for grounding and rooting, because obviously the legs are what connect us to the ground. So this program should be out within a few weeks of the podcast going live. If you're listening to this way later down the track, it's probably already out. And I've got another bunch of programs in the works. There's one on the arms, one on the spine, and then I'll go on to Dantian Gong and some more deeper internal alchemy stuff. So stay tuned. That's all coming. If you want to access any of that stuff, you can just go to my website, craigmallet.com. Patreon is linked from there, but if you want to go direct, you can go to patreon.com/aware relaxed connected. And my courses can be found at courses.craigmallet.com. So check those out, buy a few, work on them. That will change what you do, or regardless of what it is. I think you'll find the insights in the programs very, very useful if you're into anything physically or rehab or internal training, whatever. They have a lot of dynamic different uses. So I hope you enjoy them. And in the meantime, please enjoy this podcast. All right, I've got my friend Jackson here. He is a lifelong cultivation student and has been into many, many paths, but is currently in a rather dedicated and deep path. And I won't do him any injustice by trying to describe it for you. I'll let him introduce itself. But we've been kind of friends since when it would have been like 2018 or something like that, when we were really starting to hang out a bit. Jackson used to come along to my classes and we'd shoot the shit together and have a lot of fun. And then um, our paths went their own ways for a bit, and then they kind of have almost run back into each other again, which has been really, really fun. So yeah, without further ado, I might just hand it over to you. And as you're probably getting the tone, I don't really need this to be formal land, right? We can just have a bit of fun with it and chit chat and let the people hear whatever they hear.
Um, for one, just a side note, it's such a like the kind of friendship we have and that we both have with other people too, of this sort of like people you meet on the path and how the
Yeah.
journeys weave in and out of each other, and then those moments where you reconnect. It's such a I feel like it's quite a unique type of friendship, and one of the joys of this path that
Yeah.
I really love. And then when you see those friends that you haven't seen for years, there's the excitement to catch up on like, what have you been training? Where is it at now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's super fun. And the other thing I quite like is the dynamic shift, right? Because when you were coming to my classes and I was giving you like, the way I see a teacher's role is to give hints. This has worked for me. This is an interesting path, and then someone learning from that is exploring that. And you're kind of coming to me to explore, and then it kind of flipped, and I'm like, "What are you doing? That looks interesting. I don't know that stuff. Can you give me some hints from your side now?" And yeah, I love seeing that changing dynamic as well is really fun, and I think part of a good friendship as well, right? That
Totally.
it can swap and change. So yeah,
I totally, and I think that's actually probably one of the one of the qualities I would, when I look at my good friendships that are with people that are doing these arts, the ones that are the good friendships, there's this real fluidity around power dynamics of like, we can be training together and then someone can sort of take the lead and be like, hang on, like, what about this and this? And you need to fix this thing and that thing. And then someone else will, and so on. And then there's this aspect of that that I really cherish, and that I'm constantly reminding the friends that I train with regularly of being like, hey, if you see anything shit with what I'm doing, please tell me, because if I were to video it, I'd probably capture it too and then be ashamed that that's how it's
yeah.
hold on, can you please just let me know? So I've been trying to build a bit of that too. So yeah, so what I'm doing currently, as you know, I've been, doing these arts for a long time, like 16, 17 years now. And it's been there since I started. It's like, holy shit, this is what I want to do with my life. Worked with lots of different teachers over the years, got some results in some systems, but then ultimately came to a point where I was like, I've learned how to trigger experiences. I've learned how to get cool effects. I've learned how to have woo-woo spiritual stuff going on, but I don't have the foundations. And the thing that is causing these quite fulfilling things to spiritual experiences to arise is when my body is relaxed, open, and full, when my mind is calm, when my breath is deep and anchored. And there was this moment of like, oh, holy shit, I have never actually properly trained any of those pieces. I've just been training this sort of high end out there alchemy stuff. So I went on a search and trained with lots of different teachers. And actually the first thing I went to after that was to come and train with you and train with the teacher you were with at the time. That was my first sort of step of like, okay, I need to find some foundations. And then the journey continued, and then ultimately I started looking into the work of Damo Mitchell, and then COVID hit, and at the same time he released a online academy, which is fantastic. And I started training that, and it was just like, oh fuck, here it is. Here's the really good stuff. And doing the first couple lessons of a 5-year long online program, and being like, oh my God, this is really good. This is a lot better than everything I've done. I've got to take a step back and go from being like, I've been training for a decade and I'm good at these things, to like, okay, time to learn how to breathe.
Yeah.
Um, so that went into that. Then a couple towards the end of COVID, Damo announced that he would be doing a big long-term intensive training program. And once I knew that was going to be happening, I was like, yep, when I get more info, I'm going all in on that. And then we found out that it was going to be a 5-year full-time training program set up in Bali. So he set up a shop there in Bali just as, I mean, it's not as affordable as it was, but it's a pretty accessible place for all of his students from all over the world to come and be able to live and train. So we are 2.5 years into a 5-year process that is halfway, man. Yeah. So we train, I think 7 months of the year. So it's like 3 months on, 2 months off, 4 months on, 3 months off, something like that. Kind of changes a bit, but that's sort of how it goes. And then when we're there in Bali, it's training 9 to 5, 5 days a week. We're doing martial arts, we're doing external martial arts as well as internal martial arts, and then there's all the qigong and the neigong and the alchemy and the more spiritual work. So that's what I'm doing currently. It's a dream come true, man. It's been so much fun, and full on like hard work.
Yeah. So what I really wanted to dig into here, and you've talked about this bit. You've been on a few other podcasts, and they're nice listens, but it's something Damo quite is a bit of a champion of, is this idea that there's like cause and effect, right? And the modern world's just chasing effect, chasing effect, and missing cause. So yeah, maybe you can kind of walk us through what that looked like in your previous studies. Like, what would the training look like? What were the cues? What were they asking you to do? And then how did that change? What brought it down to earth, let's say, with this kind of cause and effect view of things that Damo really pushes?
I think mm, 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 mm. Where my mind immediately goes with this is I think the stuff I used to do, um, it was more the gap between the cause and the effect was gigantic. The effect we were supposed to be getting was this high end, like, the light will come in and unify with yourself and you'll enter an expansive space and your body will dissolve. And it's like that, like, is that really the measure I'm using to see if I'm doing this practice properly? Because I'm, breathing in through the point between my eyebrows and doing something with a pathway in my brain. That's the cause, and the effect is supposed to be this crazy out there thing. So one of the issues I think I used to encounter a lot, I didn't know it was an issue at the time, but looking back on it now, I see it as one, is that the cause, which is the practice, which is the steps, the cues of what to do, um, that was given. So for example, let's say, I don't know, just simply abdominal breathing, getting the breath to anchor and the abdominal breath to flow and the things that arise from that. The cause for that, there's lots of different causes for that. One of them is simply just listening to the breath, and the cause is how you listen. Um, and then the effect that should arise from the cause of the correct listening to the breath leading to abdominal breathing, the cause that should arise is the breath should lower in the body. It should extend. It should be more comfortable. The body should shift more into a parasympathetic nervous system sort of state. So that's how I would look at that sort of thing now. Whereas how I remember learning it was like, take the mind to the dantian, and then eventually there will be this electricity that builds and you'll feel it rush through your body and do all these crazy things. So I think the there was no steady progression from like this cause leads to this effect, and once you get that effect, then you add this cause and then this and this and this. And
Yeah.
funnily, the traditional Daoist systems are like totally, and the Buddhist ones too, are totally about precise cause leading to precise effect. Then once you have that precise effect, you then do the next cause and the next effect. The contemporary take on it all is we get the beginning effect, and then talk about we get the beginning cause, and then we talk about the fucking effects that Buddha got, and say that rather than being like, okay, that maybe this is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So the danger of that then is that one goes hunting the effect
Mm.
when they're doing the practice, and then we fall into the whole space of the illusion, the delusion that can arise from fabricating experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, from my perspective, what I find with students who are hunting the effect is they're looking for something that, one, isn't in their reality at this point in time. And then off the back of that, not finding it, they're kind of going, well, I must be a crap student or doing something wrong.
Totally.
And then that kind of feeds back on itself and just makes this horrible experience. These arts are meant to be connecting with ourselves, and we just end up hating ourselves more for not getting the thing that's meant to be happening. And it actually goes in the direct opposite direction to what we're trying to get. And yeah, like you said, the other thing is worse than that is the mind starts imagining effects, and everything gets caught up in that imaginal realm, um, not recognizing it as imaginal, not recognizing it as a fabrication of mind, which there's no inherent problem with an imaginal fabrication of mind. That it's just not the same thing, right? It's not not the same as the effects that arise of their own accord. So
Yeah, totally, man. And I think, and as well as it going in that direction of people sort of struggling, like, why am I not getting this effect? It can go the other direction where some people's, I think there's a bit of a link between, how to say, depends on the kind of person. Some people are very, who are more internal, can have a stronger connection between their thoughts and their nervous system and can trigger like feelings and effects more easily. Other people, not the case. I'm definitely more in the direction where I can sort of create internal phenomena, but it's not the stuff that I can create. Like I can create a tingling sensation down my arm or a feeling of heat somewhere, or do something that will lead to visions happening in my head or something. But that stuff is not actually the Neigong process, the Qigong process, or the internal arts process. It's a different thing.
yeah,
And so people who have that sort of are prone to seeing things and having experiences, then go the other way where they learn the cause and they get told what the effect is, and then they're able to do it straight away, and they're like, holy shit, I'm like, Buddha doesn't have anything on me. I can do this in
yeah, yeah,
one weekend, you know.
yeah.
Um, so I think that's a that's all one of the pitfalls of the contemporary approach to all of this stuff. So going back to your question before of like cause and effect and how it was for me previous versus now. I think I didn't understand the model of practices being cause that lead to effects. Knowing that now, it makes it a lot easier for me to understand what to work on,
Mm.
because these systems also have lists of keywords and qualities that you have to build into your body. Um, I did one that's common across all meditation traditions is like the path of calm abiding, then vipassana, then samadhi, then maybe jhana if you're lucky. And so in that, it's knowing, okay, cool, maybe I want to be able to do these higher end meditation skills, but if I don't have calm abiding locked in, it's kind of a waste of time. So just work on the calm abiding, know what the causes are that lead to the effect of calm abiding, practice that. Um, so it helps with clarity in that regard. But then the other key word in this cause and effect thing is the word of condition. So cause, effect, and conditions. I like to think of it as like a almost like a seesaw or a lever.
Mhm.
Um, the cause is the pushing down on the lever. The effect is how much it moves. The fulcrum in the middle is the conditions. So if the fulcrum
Yeah,
is really, say, let's pretend it's a triangle and it's like a well-balanced triangle and it's nice and big and strong, the effect you get from the cause will be a lot bigger.
yeah,
Whereas if the innate conditions are pretty shit, you push on the end of the lever and you'll get a tiny little thing.
yeah,
So innate conditions, there's internal conditions, which are sort of like the state of your mind, the state of your body, who you are as a person, external conditions, environment, all that sort of thing. The cause effect mechanism in these systems should go pause leads to effect, pause leads to effect enough times until that effect becomes a condition that then is an innate, stable thing in you all of the time. And then you move on to the next causes, which rely upon that previous effect, but now being a condition, and then you aim at higher end effects. So it's this constant sort of working forward in that way. And there's another, I mean, Tai Chi is a good example of this, of, I can't remember all the stages of song, but the first level of song is song being, to, I was going to say relax or release, but it's not really that. It's sort of the opening, the softening, the expansion, the letting go. So the first level of song is song shen, which means song to sink. And then, I can't remember the word for the next one, but the next one is song to inflate, I think. And then song, whatever, there's a series of them. And they can be thought of as stages in a causation process. If you're trying to go from, say, level 2 to level 3, and you're doing the causes of level 2 to get to level 3, it might work. But you can also just keep hitting the fuck out of step 1, and it will lead to level 2, and then that'll fill up more and lead to level 3. So there's this something. When we were chatting earlier before you hit record, you were talking about how if you sort of how the process can be self-correcting if the initial cause is correct. There's a bit of that too. So I think this is all of the. Yeah, I don't know if I'd have more to say right now. There's probably a lot more I could say, but I've just kind of rambled. So I'm wondering if you've got any bits you want to double click on or look at more.
Yeah. So obviously the great deal of what you're talking, maybe not obviously to me at least, a great deal of what you're talking to comes really down to two factors. And one of them is the cueing that's used in any given exercise. And the second is the recognition of that cueing on a kind of unconscious level, which is helped along significantly by a teacher expressing the same qualities, right? So the unconscious bodies resonate. And I like to think of it as the unconscious teaches the unconscious, right? Whatever words are said, if someone's in that state, your unconscious is kind of looking at theirs going, that's interesting. How do I copy that?
Yes.
And so those two things seem to have a real interplay. And I was talking a little bit with Jackson before the call about I just put out a newsletter called Not All Roads Lead to Rome, which is came off the back of someone at a festival coming up to me who was really struggling with the most basic exercise that I presented. And then kind of said they'd been doing 30 years of yoga or whatever, and then kind of had this, haha, but they all lead to the same spot. And I'm like, no, they don't. Because this cueing and this resonance of the teacher dramatically changes the effect. You can look like you're doing the same exercise on the outside, but if the cue's just off by 15 degrees, you can land in a totally different place, especially in the long term, right? If you hold tight to whatever crappy cue you've been given that doesn't work that well, 10 years can divert those two people that look like they're doing the same thing really significantly. You'll miss an important thing. And, personally, I know this because I did it. I remember after the first 10 years of my training, and I went and did some grounding stuff with a little old lady who'd been training for 3 years. And she was just hit solid. And she was like, "Why are you so stiff?" And just tipped me over. And I was like, but I'm meant to be grounded and what's going on? And my ego met the fact that I just not been taught the necessary cues to achieve this. Even though the training was all traditional training and very, very good, and the teacher actually had some of the qualities, so there was resonant stuff there. The cueing was missed. Um, and then I was like, okay, so back to the drawing board. Well, let's tidy the cueing up. And then I went through another 10 years where it was better, but still off to a lesser degree, and lots of stuff changed in that time and it kind of got better. But then I was still meeting people some of Damo's students who Jackson is training with, who had been training 5 years. And I'm like, but I've been doing 20 years of this stuff and they've got better qualities. What's going on? And back to the drawing board, let's tidy up the cueing better. And for whatever reason, this has been my path, and I'm very happy with bashing my head into those dead ends because they taught me a lot. But what it really taught me was the need for this cueing and resonance to be in place. So yeah, maybe you can talk about how the cueing was different and what the different cues were like on the stuff you were doing before compared to what you're doing now.
So queuing is an interesting way of framing it. And it's funny too, because the way that we can do this thing is we've got to put it into words first, which is the cue, but then you've got to be able to do something in your body that is not that at all. Yet that the cue is the way there. Um, mm, mm, mm. So I think again, in the past, a lot of what I came across, it was very, the language was very sort of fluffy and woo woo, and there wasn't consistency to the cueing. I think one of the keys is consistency with the cueing so that you can build the same clean action or process, how to say. So you give a cue, say the cue is to like sink the flesh and relax the body so that the flesh hangs off the bone. Using the same language around that for a period of time so that you can do it the same time each time.
Mhm.
I think that would be a key thing. The other thing that's been huge for me is, and I don't think it matters for everyone, but I think it matters for more people than not, and that is developing a really good understanding of the theory behind all of these things. Um, because then that informs your sort of how you facilitate your own relationship with the cueing and if it's working or not. One example that comes to mind is like, um, we've been studying Yang style Tai Chi Chuan. I've I had studied it a bit with the Heaven Man Earth crew before doing it with Damo, and I would say the first level of that starting to turn on as a system is when you can get the jin to move from the foot up through the body and use that to mobilize the body. Um,
Okay, sorry, just to interrupt there. What's the Jin for the people who have no idea about Tai Chi terminology?
so the jin is, how to say, so with Tai Chi, the movements in Tai Chi are generated via mobilizing chi through the soft tissues in the body. And the way that that mechanism is turned on initially is by a separation of the bones and the flesh. So the hanging of the flesh off the bones, so that a stretch happens in the connective tissue. They call it the huang. And it's kind of like the fascia, but it's lots of other things too. So there's a stretch in that. So then they say it becomes conductive like a drum skin.
Mhm.
And what one then does to mobilize the chi in Tai Chi is uses song, or the release of the mind in various areas of the body to cause the chi, the chi, that's not, I need to find that right now, to mobilize through the body. And because there's the stretch there between the muscles and the bones, there's the up and down, which is, to go back to where I was leading to this, one of the core theory, ideas of Tai Chi is non-double weighting. You always need a correspondence of yin and yang. So in Tai Chi, one of the first initial correspondences is like the basic one of up and down. You need one part of the body to be going up and you need one part to be going down. So you get a stretch. So you got a differential to work with. So back to what I was getting at, for me, understanding that theory that you need to have the correspondences in Tai Chi, you need to have the differentials between yin and yang in different parts of the body. I knew that, and I learnt that and tried to figure that out as I was learning Tai Chi in the beginning. And then the first type of Jin, of being able to get a pressurization to move from the foot through the body to mobilize the body, from the foot up through the body. The Jin being the wave through the connective tissue that mobilizes the body. I got that quite quick and quite easily, and I know lots of other people who have been able to do the same thing. And yet also there's heaps of people I know that have been training it for ages and ages, and they still can't do that initial phase. And in my mind, and there's a couple of people I've spoken to about this, and I'm like, hang on, but when you do it, you're losing the separation of bones and flesh. You get the separation of bones and flesh, you get your mass to the ground, then you release it, the Jin starts traveling up. But then when that happens, you're then losing the separation of bones and flesh. You're losing your up-down differential. So the fascia then loses its stretch, and so the force doesn't have anything to travel through. And there's been times when they're like, "Oh shit, wow, oh yeah, true, that is what I'm doing," and now I will try correct that. So for me, there's been countless scenarios where thinking about understanding the theory of the art has enabled me to troubleshoot the effectiveness with which the cue is leading to the effect.
Yeah, nice.
And then the other thing that you talked about was the resonance with the teacher. And this is a huge part of teaching, of like the teacher being able to demonstrate the movement in a way that sends out a signal that you can copy. Um, and I think for some people, that's one of the ways they can learn it quite quickly. Um, for me, it's part of it. And I definitely use that intentionally. So the process that I do when the person I'm studying with is teaching a practice is I put my mind in their body and my body, and then I song release my body and try and let it rearrange to copy the thing that they're doing. And I find that to be quite an effective way to get it very quickly. And what I find happening is we'll learn a new thing. I'm able to do it immediately because I do that, and then I start to think about it over the time, and then it gets weaker and weaker, and then I've got
Yeah, nice.
thing with everything else. But the initial version of
Pesky mind.
totally. Yeah, man. So sorry, I ranted for a little while there, but yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I've got slightly different language about it, but yes, kind of narrowing in on a language, and there's not one correct language for this, but a coherent explanation for what's going on that basically lets the mind look for an essence rather than a move, right? Because if you get a move and you're hunting a move, then you can just copy a dancer. And there's some value to doing this, but I always tell people like there's no more value to doing like copying moves than just going out and making up your own moves. Yes, the muscles will move, you'll get some coordination, you'll get some cardiovascular stimulation. This is probably good for very sedentary people, but it's not going to produce the same results as if you get like this separation of up and down working very clearly. And yeah, like you rightfully pointed out, then if you understand that the kind of you go from up to down and you've got to make contact with the pressure in the feet before you go from down to up. Because if you haven't got to down, you can't come from down to up because there's no down to come from. Um, and as you're going up, you need to keep your down. Then, it's like once you grow up that, it's like, oh, right. And what's the down? Oh, that's that feeling of connection of the foot, something simple like that. And just pointing out, hey, your foot's disconnecting, like
Mm.
prodding someone's foot, tapping someone's foot, showing them that it's connected can make a huge, huge difference. It can make them grok something in like 5 minutes that they could otherwise miss for 15 years. So that, yeah, having some sort of coherence around both the language and the action and being able to say this language means this action and kind of showing people viscerally is super helpful. And that yeah, to comment on what you were saying about the teachers stuff, for me, I find that even works without the intentionality behind it. I have so many students who are like, I can do this thing in class, and when I go home, I can't do it anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're lacking a reference point
Yeah.
to kind of mimic anymore. So you've got to train until you can do it without that reference point. Kind of like drawing, you can copy a drawing and make it pretty good, and you take the copy thing away, and you're like, oh, how do I reproduce this on my own? It's that takes shitloads more practice. That's where
Yeah.
you've got to practice on your own. Yeah, so that's what I found. Like a lot of the, um, in my experience, a lot of the basic concepts are just missing because people are too busy sort of mimicking the advanced stage, right? Seeing someone very advanced and going, well, that must be the good thing. So I'll just try and mimic that. So they copy a form or they hear wise, profound words about oneness or whatever. And then they just repeat that, hoping that that will be the cause that gets you to there. But it really doesn't. Often those things are the byproduct of like this stage by stage thing you're talking about. Um, the I wanted to circle back around to just to put contrast to that, right? So this you were kind of talking about a lot of the cueing you're doing now with the separating of the flesh and having the framework around it, so you understand. Oh, that's the part to pay attention to. Because if no one points that out, then you do it and you're like, oh, is that important or not? Do I need to keep doing that and pay attention to it, or do I just let that go because it's a passing phenomena that's completely unimportant? And if someone's not there to say, no, stay on that and investigate, really, really important that you do, or it's totally useless. You waste your time investigating that. It's not going to help at all. Um, that can really, really waste a lot of time. Um, and you can find yourself one of the this idea of cause and effect, right? One of the most obvious versions of it that I see is that, say you're standing, you're letting things open, you're letting things release, you're letting the pressure get down to the feet, and all of a sudden the chi mobilizes itself off the back of that. The chi mobilization feels a particular way. So next time you go and you're like, I'm going to make the chi mobilize, and you try and make the chi mobilize as the cause, and you're like, it's insanity, right? It didn't happen the first time for that reason because prior to it happening, you didn't know about it. You were doing something else. So wisdom is to stay with doing that something else
Mhm, mhm.
and not get distracted about what arose, which these systems call phenomena. And I feel like the modern landscape is the opposite. It's like there are all the phenomena that arise off a master. Let's try and make them happen. And you end up running in circles trying to make stuff happen that's not happening and getting kind of upset about that. And this is so, you know, my perspective of it, and by memory from some chats I was having with you, or you back in Sydney, um, the modern landscape of these practices tends to be like, let's take a meditation example, right? You've got this idea of, I've heard it called the white screen or whatever, where the whole mind fills with light. Um, um, and so people sit there trying visualizing white light, and that just doesn't work, right? It doesn't get to that same effect. That thing is a byproduct of a certain level of release. So the release is what you want to focus on, whether the white light happens or not. Who cares? Focus on the release. At the same time, if it's releasing and the light flashes and you go, oh, that thing flashed. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Should I keep doing this, or does that mean divert? Having someone there to be like, no, keep doing it, or no, divert and explore this now is so infinitely useful. Someone who's traveled the path ahead of you and been like, don't go there because I went there and fell off a cliff, basically,
Yeah.
and broke my ankle. Um, that all becomes very important. And again, it's something I see sorely missing in the modern landscape. Lots of people have heard all the words. Every single possible word about this stuff is available online. You can just investigate it. And, people, you can go get a Eckhart Tolle book about non-dual awakening and all the rest, whatever. They're good words, but um, typically trying to replicate that, read that and go, how am I doing this? And the mind just sits there thinking about it and then talking about what it's thinking about
Yes,
is not a cause that leads to the effect they're talking about in those books.
absolutely.
And if you don't notice that happening, you'll just, oh, is this the thing? I'm pretty sure it's the thing because my mind keeps saying everything is one. Therefore, I must be having that experience, and it's just not how it works. So I'm kind of more and more cognizant of how modern versions of these practices focus on the result, not
Yeah.
the process that caused the result. And maybe you can share a couple of the the dead ends you went down and what you were trying to do at that time and why you felt it didn't work, or why it worked but not in the
Mm.
kind of right way.
Yeah, so one just a side comment on that is because of the beautiful availability of information, we have all these ancient texts that were written by the highest masters. Um, and one of the things, and I think this applies to Buddhism, but more so to Taoist teachings, um, the texts on alchemy and on awakening, all these things, they're not instruction manuals, they're confirmatory sign manuals. So they are a description of what may arise if the process is done correctly. So they are a description of the effects that can happen at the high end, rather than a description of the cause or the things to be done to get to that. The causes and all of that were the practices that those guys were doing.
And usually kept really secret, right?
And get really secret. Absolutely. um, and then we're a bit like, okay, so then where's the instructions that go with that? But it's like, okay, so the this master that is at the end of his journey, that's writing some classic on to help people at that final step before they are going to awaken. Like he's doing this for people that are close to where he is. He doesn't need to give instruction on posture and breath. You know, it's at the far end. So that would be just one thing I would sort of say about this, because I think if someone comes to yoga or qigong and they're like, okay, cool, I want to see what this is about, and then they find these classics and read them, then it's kind of like fair enough that that's what you then think that you need to do. But it's yeah, it's a bit, the mess runs deep, and I don't think that people that I don't think we can blame those that grab the classics and then have a read of them and think that's what they're supposed to do, because that would make sense. But unfortunately, these things go the other way. Dead ends. I think I got results. I got results in some of the things I did, and one of them in particular, I don't think it's appropriate for me to say it on a podcast. We can talk about this
Sure.
privately, but I got the thing I was trying to get, and I got the thing that I was told that I would get too. But I think what I got really good at was being able to stimulate parts of my brain that normally one would not know how to stimulate. And the dead end of that would have been that had I kept doing that, I would have burnt myself out and caused some serious health issues, I think, because I was getting my system to do something that hormonally was probably very expensive. So that system at the time, we were just working straight away with the upper dantian, with the brain stuff, with the third eye stuff. And so with those practices, I did manage to get them to work. However, the system I'm doing now, you definitely don't start with that stuff. You start at the other end of the spectrum and start with building the base and foundations and training the body to be able to build chi, store chi, and circulate chi. So the phenomena I got to arise in those previous systems are still part of the system I'm doing now, but they're like, once you've been doing it for 30 years and your body has filled up enough that it starts to overflow into those mechanisms. So I think, funnily, actually, the since moving away from that stuff I used to do to what I'm doing now, I have far less woo-woo experiences, and instead what I have is experiences of states of calm abiding and ease and deeper states of contentment and peace. So instead of crazy visions and out there sort of things, it's more like I just feel really nice and just solid, and wow, I've felt really nice now for a long time. What is going on? So well, I've been lucky with finding systems that are kind of effective for certain things, but they're just not necessarily effective for in a sustainable way. So yeah, how else to say? I think the dead end also the main dead end that I encountered was probably the way of relating to life. So I used to be in a system that was like instant awakening. If you do your practice right, if you get it right just once, you're going to dissolve into light and you may not come back. And so, for 7 years through my 20s, I was practicing with that mentality where like every day I'd go to do my practice and I'd be like, this might be the end. And that was not a very healthy mentality for a young man who's trying to find his place in the world to have. So I think the dead end that I encountered more than anything was a way of relating to practice that is incongruent with me as a Westerner and the modern world. The dead end was a way of thinking about life and practice that was not aligned and not effective, and ultimately kind of like an escapism thing. At the time, I didn't see it that way. I'm sure lots of people close to me could see it as that. But yeah,
I mean, it's apparent in an idea that you have to get away from this particular moment if it's showing up in a mundane moment, right? If there's no fancy shit happening and no trippy weird stuff, something's not right with this moment, and I want to get away from this moment. That might just be me sitting here aching a little bit because I strained a muscle,
yes.
and feeling separate
Mhm.
for whatever reason, that there's something inherently wrong with that, and I need to get away from that reality
Yes. 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 Yes.
and to something with more grandeur.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the big shift to that, the shift in all of that for me now is having a different understanding and relationship to just like the idea of cultivation. And that, yes, the practices and the causes and the effects that we're talking about, the causes and the practices that you're doing in Neigong and alchemy and Qigong and all of that, that's a piece of cultivation, but cultivation is a lot bigger than that. And there are important ways to be in the world if you are to cultivate. And the path of trying to seek awakening, if you're going to live in the world, is very different to the path of seeking awakening than that you would take if you're a renunciate living in a cave or a temple and so on. So I think that was probably one of the key insights around all of that. The dead end was that I was living in the world and being sold a kind of renunciate.
Yeah. And how did you find that attitude actually affected your day-to-day reality?
On one level, it was that I sought to resolve issues in my life through my practice, rather than just resolving the issues in my life. Um, and that kind of thing of thinking, hang on, if my practice gets better, then my life will get better, rather than if I make my life better, my practice is going to be heaps better. There's a bit of a thing of like, your meditation's not going to make your life any better. If you make your life better, your meditation might be good.
Nice.
So it was a bit of that. Yeah,
Which means you have to confront all the nonsense you're doing in your life and sort it out, right?
exactly. Yeah. And I think, with to sort of throw a framework at that, to be able to, one of the ways I think about it is to be able to go towards something like meditation, you need to be able to take your awareness into the body and go inside. And there's a certain degree of how the conscious, subconscious and unconscious have to actually be aligned for you to be able to drop that in. And so any little niggle you have is going to block it, like niggle about your life, some task you haven't done, something you're a bit guilty about, something stressing you. All those things are then little things that will make it harder to be able to go in and unify with your inner self or what you really are. That being said, you then compensate for that by your capacity to let go and accept. But it's a lot easier to deal with something in your life than it's going to be able to accept it internally. So if something wrong, you maybe just go deal with it. It'll take a couple of days.
I mean, I've found that some of those things, whatever practice you bring in at the most profound practices, they're just not going to dissolve until you sort the life part out of it.
Yeah, no, totally.
I had this big experience when I left the school the Daoist school that I was in, that there was just a whole level of release that arrived just from leaving the school.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't think I could have, not with the best practices on the planet, contrived that release, right? Part of me didn't want to be there anymore. And until I addressed that, it's holding, right? It's holding against. And so there's this real need to actually change your life. Like physically, in a Monday, like change the job that you hate, change the stupid people you're hanging around with. Like the stuff, everyone knows the stuff they need to change at some level. There's like some level of like, yeah, but I'll just wait a bit longer until circumstances are better or whatever. But it's just like, no, just change it. Just get on with rearranging it. And I was mentioning to Jackson before this that like a lot of my friends at the moment are saying, you must be practicing heaps because of whatever. I see them every 6 weeks sometimes, and there's a lot of change in that time. And I'm like, I'm practicing way less. What I'm doing more of is sorting this stuff out in my life, all these incongruencies, which is actually a lot of things like, how I put the dishes away after there's that little guilty part that says, I should probably put them away, but I'm lazy. I'm just going to go scroll on the phone. Right? It's just address that, right? Just sort it out. And that's so much more powerful than, I'll just go not do that and sit in meditation for another 2 hours until that feeling goes away.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. And yeah, I think, what we're kind of pointing at, I've taken this approach, and I probably still take this a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people are taking it. They're looking for a spiritual solution for their well-being and how they feel. When there's going to be a much simpler thing that could be done, and actually try to use the spiritual practice to try deal with it, probably makes it worse. Actually, a lot of the time.
Yeah,
I think
it's nice.
helping more. And then something I was wanting to point to with that is one of the, I mean, ideally, all these things we're talking about are like sort of sorting your life out. Ideally, that is the foundation that then you do your spiritual path on top of. And it then works a hell of a lot more effectively. So one of the key qualities, I think, is the things necessary to be able to get the internal arts and what we're talking about to be able to work, is integrity. And, just total transparency, I definitely don't have the level of integrity I would like to, or think I should have. But as I reach greater levels of integrity, and I mean it kind of like almost on a mechanical level, like to what degree is your internal being, your actions, your values aligned as something that's sort of coherent. The greater the level of integrity, sort of psychological, emotional, value-based, structural integrity, the greater the level of that, the more a cause that is a practice from the internal arts will cleanly lead to the effect. Because the greater there's the level of sort of disintegration or the lack of integrity, that cause is done, but then it has to go through all this weird shit. And then you might get something at the other end. Whereas if the integrity is there, it can sort of be done cleanly, so to speak.
Nice. I like to say, like, it's not about getting to perfection, but it's about getting the idea of yourself and the physical reality of yourself on the same page, which means things like just being honest about, I'm not there on that particular thing. That's not a skill I have at this point in time. Maybe it'll come in the future, maybe not. You're not, and in both directions. So there are also met people, and this is really interesting. Maybe you can talk to this as well. This kind of idea of the union of opposites like that being an act of centering, right? And the expectations of centering versus the reality of them, because this has worked in both directions for me. People get uncentered from themselves through like an inflated idea of themselves where they believe they're better than they are. And like, the amount of people like, I'm deeply relaxed, and I just press on them very lightly with one finger, and the whole system goes into fight or flight and like tenses up. And, your unconscious isn't relaxed, whatever your conscious mind thinks, you know, uh, and there's no problem with the unconscious being not relaxed either. I'm talking about bringing the idea onto the same page as that. It's like, oh, I'm not relaxed today. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. But get them together. But the other way too, I've met so many people who've come to class and they've been like, oh, I feel disgusting today. I'm all out of sorts. I'm all this. I'm all that. I'm like, okay. And I'm pushing them. I'm like, solid as hell. Push even harder. It's like, I can't even budge you. And from my perspective, what I see is that person's mind has this idea of center being like this very clean thing, whereas center is like the union of the clean with the messy. And when they're both together, you'll feel the mess. You'll feel the mess clear as day. You won't be too perturbed by it, but it'll be there, right? And when that's connected up, the light with the dark, the yin with the yang, they're together, it doesn't feel like sunshine and rainbows entirely. There's this background or kind of whatever sense of effortlessness, but like even effortlessly being a bit mangled, a bit out of sorts. And when those two things come together, there's like this real sense of like, oh, I feel myself. And that's a bit gross sometimes. But oh, cool. The reality is that makes you solid and that makes you grounded in the world and in the reality. And suddenly these two, like the idea and the reality go, oh, it's like, oh, it's like that's when the union starts to happen. At least it's not a complete union because you can always kind of unite more and more and refine that. And you might meet someone like the Demos of the world who've spent 40 years doing that for 10 hours a day and they can express that more than you, but that doesn't mean anything. If your idea of yourself and the reality of yourself are on the same page, this thing arises, at least in my experience, where you feel like you're where you're meant to be doing what you're meant to be doing at the time you're meant to be doing it.
Wow.
And that's a work, it's like kind of, okay, this is where I am working on this particular thing. That person's beyond that or whatever, they're working on their thing at whatever level they're working at based on the amount of time they've been doing it. But there's this sense of contentment with your lot in life that arises.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues with the sort of fancy language and exciting stuff is that, and by that I mean what we're pointing out with the sort of contemporary way of talking, the way these arts are communicated in the contemporary web. It makes people have a negative relationship to the parts of themselves that aren't feeling so good. And so then you have like an aversion towards an internal state, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to be able to integrate that and move forward. So yeah, I think the extreme end of this going very badly is someone who has gotten very good at pretending they're okay and blocking everything going on inside out.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely have the experience where I have had a little period of it where it was very intense for a little while, and then it's evened out. But the period of my practice going very well, and that leading to like maybe a greater level of structural integrity that then enables me to see more of the bullshit that's going on.
Yeah.
And her period that was like, I'd do my morning practice and be like, oh my God, that was really good. And then it'd be like, oh fuck, this evening is going to be rough.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the ebb and the flow of the roller coaster of the thing. But I think also one of the keys is that you don't need to. Yeah, one of the things that I've learned that's important for me is not trying to fix things with practice. I still try and do it all the time, and I'm getting better to understand what practices I can fix things with. But knowing, okay, what is something that I need to address in my life? What is something that's like an inefficiency in how I'm behaving? And what is something that I can deal with practice? I used to try and resolve negative emotion with seated practice, which is a terrible thing to do. These days, if I were to use practice to resolve it, I'll do an intense and aggressive martial art practice. And that for me works way better.
Yeah. Get a punching bag, belt the crap out of it.
Do some bloody shingy and get all intense in the eyes and go all crazy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So, yeah.
Cool. So given you just pulled up Shingy, I want to geek out a little bit. And for those who aren't familiar with especially the internal Chinese martial arts, this bit might not be as fun for you, but whatever. If you haven't heard of them, and maybe you'll hear some terms and go Google them and check them out because they're really, really cool arts. There's a lot of culture behind them. There's a lot of tradition behind them, and despite the modern versions of them being a bit fluffy, the old versions of them was serious business. These arts came from people who were like protecting caravans from bandits and actually had life or death on the line, so needed to come up with pretty sweet ways of protecting themselves. Yeah, and of course with that comes romantic stories about whatever else. But if you've ever been to meet some of these people who are really, really good at this stuff, some of it defies rational logic, like the amount of power that can be produced with seemingly no effort, and the speed with people. There's all these kind of like weird stuff, and if you film it and put it on YouTube, it'll just get banned and it'll be like highlighted on Dojo Light in about 5 seconds. But there's some legit stuff there. For everyone who hasn't seen it, it's worth kind of poking around until you can find a legit teacher, because it'll really expand your horizons. But yeah, maybe you wanted to geek out a little bit about the stuff you're training now, because you're doing, as far as I understand, there's like Xingyi, Bagua, Tai Chi, and some like Shaolin kind of external stuff that you're training. Yeah, so maybe can you just kind of elaborate on?
Year one in Bali, we just did Shaolin. Well, no, we did Tai Chi too, but we did heaps of Shaolin, and we did heaps of the foundational stance work, and
Like horse stance, bow stance, empty stance, this kind of stuff.
Mabu, Gongbu, all these stances, and really built them in. And that was,
Did they have the Shiabu, the step behind the resting stance? Oh man, that one's brutal.
yeah. So we did heaps of that, and we continue to do a lot of that. I've done other martial arts previously, but this is what I'm working on right now. We do Yang style Tai Chi Chuan. We do Xingyi Chuan, and our teacher does teach Bagua, but in the process we've been doing, we haven't done that yet. So the main internal martial arts being Xingyi, Tai Chi, Bagua, and they work on sort of the thing that makes them internal arts is the movement and the control of and the mobilization of the body is done via the chi. So the issue with a lot of the modern takes on these arts is people have seen the movements and then replicate it physically, whereas the movements in these arts should be done on top of a body that already has built chi and has built the connections in the body to be able to use the chi in the mind to mobilize the body. Then they're on the spectrum of sort of like there's levels of the internal. Xingyi would be the more external of the internals. And then I think Bagua, then Tai Chi. I think Tai Chi can go deeper than Bagua from what I've heard, but this is all way beyond me. But the reason, one of the cool mechanisms with this is that in all of the internal arts and these systems, one of the core things that we're learning to do is adjust our awareness, adjust our attention to be able to go back through the different layers of reality and the layers of ourself.
Yeah,
and
nice.
in the beginning, we learn to do that by softening our mind and being able to soften it back. As we soften it, it then will connect with different layers of the body and the tissues and so on. So Xingyi, as an example, uses quite a forceful, intense mind, and that leads to the chi acting on a slightly more external layer of the body. Tai Chi goes way deeper to using a very deep released level of mind, as deep as you can go, and that then accesses much deeper systems in the body. And it's a learning each of these arts alongside the Neigong, alongside the seated practice and everything that we do, has been a really sort of fascinating journey on how the level of dialing forward or back that you do with the attention determines what layer of the body you interact with, which is happening via the chi, which also determines what layer of the chi and what quality of chi you're working with. So that it's been fascinating to get like quite a comprehensive exploration of them and see, okay, so this one is working on this quite superficial line of elastic tension through the muscles of the legs when we're in Shaolin, whereas then when we're going to Tai Chi, we're doing these extremely subtle like release of one part of the body that causes the tissues in another part of the body to rotate and do something. And yeah, it's been amazing, man.
Yeah, cool. So are you finding that the qualities leak into the other arts. For example, in my own experience, right? If I like doing Tai Chi quite high, just because I can get more release through the legs. If I go too deep in the legs, they all tense up and I can't release through them, right? And particularly when you get like thighs low to the ground, kind of horse stance, there's just my joints aren't open enough, my knees aren't open enough to facilitate a release through that. So I can't find it there. It's a different sensation, right? Having the legs work muscularly very hard in that thing, and maybe making that strong enough that you can endure that for a long time, compared to Tai Chi. I can be quite high and it can be difficult in a different way because the legs are released and they're like at these deepest weak licks struggling, and the superficial layer is just kind of gone dissolved somewhere. So it's not the same. But are you finding that with time you're getting more of this, like maybe the deep Tai Chi quality kind of infiltrating something like Shaolin, or something like
Totally.
even your acrobatic stuff that you do?
Yeah. So what's a good example? They all, and it's cool having them all as different tools to be able to work on different things.
Yeah.
For example, so trying to sharpen your mental quality in seated practice is a very challenging thing to do. To be able to, the quality of mind we need for seated practice to work is this right balance of concentration and also release. And what do they? Yeah, in the Daoist language of it is to rest and to guard. So there's a part of the mind that is guarding and has this sort of assertiveness to it, and then everything else is resting and releasing. So to be able to do that in a seated practice is like it's very hard to do, very hard to do to get right. But you can then break that down and work on the pieces of that. So okay, I'll go do some Xingyi then, which uses a very forceful, intensive mental quality, and training Xingyi for the intensity of the mind and the sharpness. Then means then when I go back to the seated practice, I've worked on this little component that is then present in my seated practice to make
Nice.
that. Or with the Tai Chi, you do a massive Tai Chi session, and so hang on, let me backtrack what I'm saying. If I were strategic in the way I practiced, which I am sometimes, and I'm doing my seated practice, and I know that I'm just sort of plateauing it, it's not going any deeper, and my release isn't, and the sort of spacious quality of my seated work isn't very good, I could then go away from the seated work and do a whole bunch of Tai Chi and come back, and there's going to be a change. So the different is like you're kind of trying to work on this thing from all of these different angles, and ultimately the thing you're trying to work on is ultimately your capacity to enter meditation. That's what all of these tools are for. But there's so many factors that we need to adjust to be able to make that possible. And then these arts do the different things. And also they are kind of like, they help each other too. So for example, the work we did in Shaolin to build the elastic lines into the legs made my Tai Chi so much better, and
Yeah.
made then that inherent quality that's in the legs and in the stances present while I'm doing my Tai Chi, and then I don't need to think about it because the body's built that way. So there's a bit of that, and then there's also like, I can't imagine it being, for myself, I don't believe I could healthfully just do Neigong and just build energy and just open all of that. I need the other stuff alongside it. Otherwise it gets too intense. So Tai Chi, I think is for me extremely useful for kind of integrating the stuff that happens through Neigong and seated practice and the building of energy. Tai Chi is really good for helping the mind and the body and the chi integrate what has developed in any of them and harmonize them. And it's very, it sounds sort of trite to say grounding, but it literally grounds the chi into the body. If you just do hips and Neigong all the time, you sort of, it can make you a bit crazy and can really stimulate the mind and the nervous system and all of these things. And in Neigong, there are tools for dealing with that. However, Tai Chi is a very quick and easy way to get in there and do that work. So in that way, the different arts also sort of protect against the issues that come from the other ones.
Yeah, nice.
For example, doing both Tai Chi and Xing Yi is really cool, because if you do too much Tai Chi and if you make a few subtle mistakes in the way you do Tai Chi and do too much of it, you can release you can release in a way that actually depletes you.
Mhm.
And if alongside that you're doing an art like Shaolin or Xing Yi that is actually more intense and not about release, you're maintaining a level of correct tension in your body that then when you do go to do the release stuff, you're not falling apart.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a bit of that too. I think the main thing is really the adjusting of the mental qualities, and then having tools that are effective for different times, different places, and different things you need.
Yeah. And so I kind of mentioned before, but you do, and I think you're getting back into it more, right? The acrobatic tricking, right? And we were talking a bit at this before the call. We kind of started recording the call about this. The cultivation arts are this almost too serious thing, right? It's serious business getting into the cultivation arts, and you can lose your playfulness a little bit when you get into that, and just you know, them. I don't know if it's probably necessary for people to get a little bit serious about it at one point because you won't get the depth otherwise. But at some point, it's good to come back around to this playfulness. And you were just telling me that your playfulness is kind of just reignited to some degree, and you're kind of getting into the tricking stuff again. The trick is really fun. It's this soft acrobatics where you're doing backflips and stuff, and crazy flying kicks and stuff. So yeah, maybe you could just talk to that a little bit.
Totally, man. So just for context, I used to, from my teens to early 20s, I was on the path of trying to be a pro snowboarder. So when I stopped doing that, I then started learning tricking and acrobatics and the gymnastics stuff to sort of like fulfill my adrenaline rush needs. And then, and then didn't do it for a while, and then have recently been picking it back up again. And I think for me, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that, like, I'm doing all this work to develop my body skills and body awareness and training all these martial arts, but I'm not fighting, and I've sort of juggled with this thing of like, hang on, I'm training all this martial arts all the time. And now and then we do partner work, we do applications, and, sparring is a thing. But for one, I'm not the kind of person that would want to go out and look for fights to test my skills. And also the path of like going and training in MMA to train and do a fight, it's like, that's a whole other thing in me. And I have definitely fantasized about doing that, to be able to take the qualities of the martial arts that I'm training now into something where I'm applying it, so to speak. But that's not my path. And, I'm 32 now. So to try and to pick that up now and going that, it just seems like an extra thing that's a waste of time. I may do it at some point, but that's not relevant right now. But what I do have is a hell of a lot of many years of doing acrobatic-y sort of stuff. So continuing to refine, picking that art back up and trying to develop it alongside the cultivation arts has been really rewarding. And I think alongside the cultivation, particularly like Neigong and Qigong and stuff, you need a physical art. Um, the internal martial arts are kind of the one that go with it best. But for me personally, I'm not living a life where I'm fighting. So they're not as relevant as they would have been if I was. Like, I hear stories about, people I've trained with before, and then hearing, Dama's stories from when he was young, and like going and training in these ancient martial arts, and then getting challenge fights and traveling around China, and like they lived the Kung Fu warrior dream.
Yeah.
And that's not the world I live in. And I do resent that sometimes, but that's just the way it is. So
I had a nice like, oh, I'm not a martial artist. Oh, that's cool. Like, how many fights have I been in my life? Oh, kind of one that had nothing to do with me and ended very quickly. It's like, it's a different kettle of fish.
yeah. So then for me, what I've been thinking is like, okay, but I need to I need to have a physical art alongside what I'm doing that I have passion for. Now I do, and I mean that sort of like get fired up by it, and I do get fired up by the internal arts and by Tai Chi and Xingyi and all this stuff, but it's a different sort of thing. And it's also like a really, how to say, yeah, I get fired up by them, but they're like the work that I have chosen to do, that I want to do, that the outcomes from I love, but at times the practicing of it can get monotonous. And then, then it changes and then something new happens and then it's amazing for a little while. But having the acrobatics, picking the acrobatics back up alongside all of this has really given some fun and lightness and passion that actually has then bled into the other arts that I'm doing.
Yeah, nice.
And then the acrobatics is, so then like how does the acrobatics and the internal arts sort of connect? Which I've been exploring because I'm like, how can this has to be relevant for my cultivation. I have to be able to be training these acrobatics in a way that is useful. And on one level, the elasticity you build into your body with the Shaolin is really useful. And then so I've created all these sort of drills that take the Shaolin elasticity building stuff, and then I put it into jumping patterns and kicking patterns, and that's been really fun. I'm about like a year into doing that regularly, and it works, and that's sick. The more I can get that quality in, the easier the acrobatics become. And then the other thing is the mental quality of acrobatics is quite interesting because you've got to do this, build pressure and intensity, and then explode. And if you're doing a combo, then you need to like hold that explosion and channel it through shapes.
Definitely don't release it. You'll land on your face. I know from experience.
Well, but then some, there is a release and then there's like a
Right. Yeah,
needs to
nice.
spring back up. So yeah, so I think it's good for me. It's a good way of practicing courage and not aggression, but like explosiveness. And I find that really fulfilling. And for me and who I am as a person, like I need this like this excitement and this zang. So I've got some friends who can just sit there and not sit there, stand there, where they can just practice Tai Chi for hours and hours and hours on end. And I can do that, and I like doing that. But what will actually happen if I do that is I'll practice Tai Chi for 2 hours, and then I'll get all excited and jump around a bunch, and then I'll go back to practicing the Tai Chi. Like it's just sort of inherent to who I am as a person. So that's been, and it's also been quite there's been a sort of level of self-acceptance in it too, of like, instead of just pushing myself to be like, okay, no, acrobatics is, not useful for Tai Chi and, not necessarily helpful for these other things. I should be doing these other things, doing those arts. Yeah, it's been a nice process for me to go, hang on, I need to have a thing that is an art form that I can be doing alongside all of this, that helps me like express my body in the way that feels most aligned to me. And then Craig, I've been playing with how to use chi mobilization for acrobatics.
Oh, nice.
And it is a thing. It is a possible thing.
I imagine it's very difficult.
Well, yeah, I think the issue is you need to already be able to do the acrobatic. So
yeah.
acrobatic movements, what I can do, I can put internal qualities into them. But yeah, it's not the other way. It's not like you could develop the ultimate jumping chi power and then be able to do any flip. It's like you already need to be able to do the flip, and then you can make the mechanism that does it more and more internal. And I think it's been fun being like, actually, no, I'm gonna genuinely try and work on this as something over the rest of my path of like, how can I take internal martial arts mechanics and take them into acrobatic movement? And yeah, I think I can do bits of it. I can use the Tai Chi mechanics to jump.
Cool. Oh man, next time we're in person together, I want to see that. That would be fun.
But that is relying on the fact that when I was snowboarding back in the day, I had very good kung fu teacher who taught me this whole system for leg elasticity. So I've done a bunch of that, and then now have the Tai Chi internals, and then being able to use the release to trigger that elasticity in the legs. There's a thing there, and I think, and now and then I try and share it with people, and then I'm like, hang on, actually, no, we need to do all this, taking it into the leg stuff first. But I think it's possible. I think it's possible. The key is that you have to have all the shapes already there, and you've done a bunch of that too. So we could definitely.
Yeah, I don't think I can go to the level you can, but I can definitely do some tacky cartwheels and jumps and things like this. So yeah,
It's weird because it doesn't. So like I said, on the acrobatic movements that I have that I can do well, I can apply those mechanics easily. But when I try and put it into things I can't necessarily do well, like it's really deep.
Yeah, I mean that kind of works on all levels, right? That's why the internal arts movements are so simple, because you need to be able to do the movement. If you're sitting there going, "Where do my hands go and where's the shoulder meant to go?" Forget mobilizing anything.
Absolutely.
And I mean, when you've got so many moving parts, like in an acrobatic move, because you really need to know all of that, plus what your torso doing, plus where you're oriented in space, plus all this stuff. It's yeah, I can kind of like fantasize about it, but I have no reference point to what that might be like. I do know very well that I've played with some things, right? With running, I've managed to tap into this effortless running where it's just like that is the direction, and I'm releasing everything in that direction, and the body just goes, and it feels like it's being carried. And I even accidentally tapped into that a few times early in the day. I remember running in the hall in with my first teacher, and that just came online, and I just went like 3 or 4 times faster than everyone else. And I remember like finishing the laps, and I just was like this, just like, oh, I'm done. And there was just no breathing or heaviness, even though I was going super fast. And everyone's like, what the hell is that? Breathing really heavily. I'm like, I don't know. And I could never make it happen again. But I've kind of been tuning into like the voluntary, like, can I get that happening? And there's some degree of it. It's a bit glitchy for me at the moment, but it's really, really interesting. And I imagine it can be taken into things like, because running is quite an explosive task as well. But I've been playing with some of the old natural movement stuff too, like tree climbing, and how I can connect with the feeling of the tree and then like release the branch into me to kind of bring it closer to me and stuff like this, and how that all looks and works. And it's clunky as hell for me at the moment, but it's like, oh, it's kind of possible. And definitely like I'm able to explore it in stuff that I've trained up the wazoo, like all the natural movement stuff I did for years and years and years and years. So it's like I'm not learning the stuff as I'm doing it. It's stuff that's in the muscle memory, right? In the unconscious has it already.
And I think this is the key, that sort of what we were getting at earlier of, it's not, this is a better way of describing the play. And it's not that it doesn't need to be play. It needs to be like engaged, passionate curiosity, exploring. And when you train Tai Chi, you don't actually ever do that, because everything is a cause leading to an effect. Even when you're doing push hands, there's a certain thing you're working on. And then your form is sort of the expression of all of those qualities. And then if you're a fighter, maybe it would express formlessly in that. But, all those systems, they are very extremely linear and step by step, step by step.
Well, then they have the chaos of fighting to balance that, right?
There you go.
Yeah. So, and if you don't have that, you better have that chaos somewhere else.
Totally. Yeah, well said, man. And that chaos being something that you're figuring out and you're jamming with and exploring, and you're trying to learn how your body can deal with something and develop new things. And I think that's actually I don't think it matters what art you're doing. Ideally, it's something physical that involves you figuring out your body and moving well. And I think that's the thing that needs to be alongside.
Yes, and maybe we can end with this like note on the importance of the physical. Well, I mean, to each their own. There are definitely some people who just went like full internal, and they get to 80 and they can do stupidly insane internal stuff, but they're kind of probably overweight, can't run or walk or jump around that well anymore, but I like touch you with a finger and you just get gin shot across the room, These people exist for sure. And it's a good, like, to remember cause and effect. Use it or lose it is the old term. And if you think your internal training is going to keep your physicality alive, not really. It'll keep some degree of it, but if you want to be like running and jumping into your old age, you better just run and jump a lot, and keep that going. And maybe if you're curious enough, you'll try and get those internal mechanisms inside the running and jumping, but don't expect it to just be there because it's there. The people who can run and jump in their old age run and jump a lot, and you better keep doing it. And that's kind of that's definitely been a lesson I've been coming back around to. I'm re-engaging with all my old school internal arts like cha-cha. Love some of the cha-cha stuff. Spring legs, this kind of stuff is super, super fun. And, it's brutally challenging with these low stances and holding for a long time. And so there's that element of being like, all right, let's kind of overcome this challenge. But also just the agility, I personally, I want to keep not a high level, but a base level of agility. I like being able to vault over fences. If I can do this when I'm 90, sweet. So I'm going to keep practicing. I'm going to not let it fall away. I like being able to jump. I like being able to climb stuff. So I'm going to keep some base level of this and keep swinging in the trees and jumping around. And it gives me that sense of fun and play. This morning we have a little meditation group that meets on the beach at 6 a.m. And the beach where I go to at Coolum has this like platform with rails, and then it drops down another maybe like 40-50 centimeters from where the platform ends to the sand. And you can do these real nice vaults over, and you can actually like vault and catch the edge of the platform with your feet. I forgot what that vault's called, but it's like a turn vault where you like end in the cat hang.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you can like spring off the cat hang onto the sand really, really in a simple way. Or you can just like yeet it onto the sand as well. Which is it's just fun to do that stuff. And it's fun to have that I'm sure there was some sort of philosopher that said something like it's a shame to not experience the fullness of your physicality in this life. And I can totally get that, right? Yes, it's all temporary. Yes, it's going to go at one point. Yes, don't grasp and hold on to it. But care for it while you've got it, I think is a really, really nice thing. It's this kind of temporary gift for this body. Like, treat it well. Make sure it works well into old age. Don't let it get decrepit and gross. It is the philosophy I live by. And at one point I had this idea of the Death Day Olympics. How can I, like, on the day that I die, be at like this kind of the best I can be, and how does that change how I train for the rest of my life? Because if you're peaking at 40, you train very differently to if like, oh, I got to keep this going for a long time, and I got to be sustainable, and I can't overdo it, and I can't burn out. So you start thinking of things differently, a lot more like repetitive, gentle, low to medium intensity stuff rather than super high intensity stuff. But yeah, just that fun and playfulness too. Like, keep that alive.
Yeah, man. That's sort of where what I'm aiming at with the acrobatics. I used to do a lot of the sort of more, well, I've had some experiences that make me go, hang on, all right, that's what soft acrobatics is. I never really got it. I just heard that term. And then the other day I was doing some new movements, and I'm like, oh, hang on, maybe this is actually what soft acrobatics is. Being that, like, if you think of gymnastics, it's very linear, and they use punch takeoff. So they run along, jump, land both feet on the ground in a strong posture, go into a tuck, flip, land, straight lines again. Whereas if you go to tricking, which is the sort of merging of taekwondo, capoeira, breakdancing, that stuff, they use a lot more rotational force.
Nice.
So there's less impact going through the body because you catch it all in rotations.
Huh, interesting. But there was
So-
a overlay there.
Then going to soft acrobatics, that includes floor work, you have the whole space from the air all the way down to the ground. So one of the things I've been loving lately is like do my flips, But instead of trying to land on my feet and stay on my feet, I land on my feet and then fall onto the ground into a roll and then do a pattern on the ground. And it's been so fun, man, because it's just like used all the power to do the flip, but then there's no impact because you have the whole space
Relative to the ground.
Yeah, you can melt from the peak of your jump all the way to the ground rather than having to land on the feet. So the thing that I've been, I think soft acrobatics, to me at least, I've never researched the term. I should probably Google search it after this. But using the whole range from on the ground to being in the air as your space you use power in, and then building patterns into the body and these spiraling movements to be able to take that force all the way to the ground and back up. My dream is I wanna get the Tai Chi body fullness, the get pung, and then be able to melt in pung through old age with soft acrobatics.
Nice. If you achieve that, you should get some sort of award. There definitely should be an award for that. I don't know that there are too many people in the world who've achieved that. Yeah. You can be the next thing. You can have like a little medal that 3,000 years later, people are like, wow. I think that's a nice place to wrap up. We've kind of gone through the whole spectrum of internal and external stuff. The soft acrobatics just reminded me, nothing to do with this, but I've got a friend, Neil Teisner. Sorry, Neil, who is a software acrobatic. It's his whole thing, and I'm going to get him on the podcast and talk about what he does because I love Neil. And he's got some cool stuff.
As a side note, his courses, I'm in them all. They are the best acrobatic educational content I've ever come across.
Cool. So Neil, if you're listening to this, I'm coming for you. You're coming on the podcast. I'm going to make you do it if I can. I don't know if he is listening to this or not, but yeah, hopefully we'll get him on and get him to geek out about that because he's incredible with it. He's got like a whole level.
Would you please ask him what explore the mental qualities stuff, because there's a couple of videos that of his that I've watched where he talks about acrobatics as a sort of exploration of your relationship to risk.
Nice.
Which is, do we have one more tangent in this, Craig?
Yes, let's go. Sorry, people, you're expecting an hour podcast. You're getting the almost 2-hour version. Let's go. Let's do it.
There's as one, like, when you go and do something that's dangerous, but within your capacity, you can kind of have a sense of like, oh, I'm safe, or no, I'm pushing it too much. I did a lot of snowboarding in my youth. I rode motorbikes, did all the things. And recently I've been riding, in our time in Bali, we've been renting, sports bikes, riding them around the island.
Oh, nice.
Which is extremely fun. And the sports bike, the experience of riding a road bike is such a crisp experience of your relationship to risk. And I feel this thing has been developing for me that I would call like the risk sensitivity, or like the aperture of risk.
Yep.
So as I'm riding along, if I'm going smoothly, my gaze is open and I'm judging all the risks ahead of me and I have plenty of time to act. And as you go faster and faster, you end up in the risk tunnel.
Yeah.
Where you have less and less time to make decisions to respond to the risks that are in front of you. And having done things like that all through my life, I have a very good relationship with understanding that point that I can't cross. And I can feel it in my nervous system, in my body. And as soon as I get close to it, I pull back, and I know where that is, and I can come up to it and come back, but I never go over it. And acrobatics is quite similar. Like if I trying a movement that I have the prerequisites for, it's a little bit scary, but you can kind of do it, you're going to land safe. Whereas I'm sure you remember those times of, doing acrobatics with people and someone just trying something that is just not in their space at all, going horribly wrong. I think I don't know how many places it expresses in, but probably a lot. But this thing of like the development of the quality of understanding the pressure, like the risk pressure,
Yeah. I actually, I did like in 2013 or 14, I did a MoveNet camp in Thailand with Vic Verdia. And one of the things he pointed out was understanding risk versus danger. So risk is the chance it'll go wrong.
Yes.
And danger is what happens if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So if he was talking about like if you're balancing on like a really low thing, you might have crap balance. So there's good risk, high risk, you'll fall off. The danger is non-existent because you just end up on the ground by stepping over, right? So high risk, low danger is good. The the higher the danger, the lower the risk you want, right? Which means you need to be good at shit, right? You need to have zero risk or like 1% risk of it going wrong, because if it goes wrong, you die, more or less. So knowing that kind of risk versus danger, that as the danger gets higher, the risk has to get lower, and like keeping them balanced. And then if there's low danger, super high risk, right? We can play. I can get Adrian or someone to like throw cannons at me and see if my iron shirt can take it, because there's not really much danger there. He's controlling it. He's only giving what he think I can handle. There's a little bit of danger that someone will overdo it. But if I do that same thing in a fight with a stranger, the danger's escalated, right? Because they won't stop. So I better not risk that kind of thing. So you have that, and same with climbing. As you get higher, right, your balance better be better. Lower, it doesn't matter if your balance is no good. You can take risks. Higher, you only go on stuff you can balance on, like for sure. Because if you fall, it's a long way down.
Totally.
And then that danger gets mitigated by certain skills. If I'm on something that's like, let's say 3 meters high, I have a capacity to absorb and roll off a 3 meter high thing and be totally fine. So that reduces the danger. The risk of falling is moderate, but whatever, the danger is minimized. Same situation, but there's just like spikes and debris on the ground. I can't let anymore, right? The danger's like increased, so I'm not going to take that risk anymore. I'll kind of go on, like just climb on like a sloth and go along the safe way. Yeah. So I really liked just that concept, like risk and danger, and letting them kind of balance each other. Really, really went in somewhere, and you do workshops, and like 10 years later, there's like one thing you remember that was kind of from the workshop. It was it. Was a nice
And I
thing.
think that the sensitivity, like a lot of people, that whole thing about like the need of rough and tumble play, and how, like it helps us socialize and it does something to regulate our mammalian brain system, whatever, all that. I think another part of that is this relationship to risk thing.
Yes.
Like you start to learn your edge. And I think this is sort of to tie this back into what we've been talking about. For me, this has been something that's been coming up of like, okay, doing the internal arts and all of that is great, but I need to have experiences in my life that are pushing me. That you then learn about yourself. Like just doing the practice is not enough. And often the practices is doing the practice is not the thing that the practice is not where you experience the transformation. The transformation is then, okay, you encountered a scary situation and we responded differently to you.
Yeah, and there's like a big asterisk on that, because it's got to be good practice if it has that like leaking out effect. If it's not leaking out into your life, something went wrong. Assuming you're cultivating, assuming you've got the cultivation idea at least. And I see this a lot. I see people who are just like phenomenal in their title, like miles and miles above me, and it's like form stops, qualities go woohoo, and just like back to a bumbling idiot. And what went? Why isn't that leaking out? That kind of this kind of does it leak into my life? I don't actually like the arts that much for themselves, right? I like them for this quality of leaking out into my life, and if they're not doing it, I'm not really gonna be. I have this, and more, right? I really got inspired by a lot of Adyashanti's work. It's kind of non-dual work, but for whatever reason, he resonated with me in a few of the things he presented. And one of his little phrases that stuck with me was that practice is not a path to reality. Practice is an expression of reality, but so is acrobatics, and so is anything else you do in your life. So it's an expression of reality that tends to cultivate relationship with reality better than other expressions, but it's still no more inherently better or worse. And so if you're kind of trapped in practice being reality and everything else being unreality that you've got to get away from, it creates this dynamic we were talking about, this escapism dynamic, right? I've got to escape into my practice, where if the practice is there to leak into the rest of your life until the point where you're like, I don't even need to practice anymore. Like, you know, life is the practice and practice is the life. That's the kind of union thing happening. And don't do that too quickly. It won't work if you do it too quickly. But you know, that's kind of where it starts to head. It starts to leak into here and there. And you know, you're this example I use all the freaking time because it was really funny. I was teaching my friend Alex just some basic release stuff, and he started. I was at his place, and he started like sawing some sourdough that had you know, the hard sourdough that needs some oomph to get through it with the bread knife, and his shoulders were all up around his ears, like forcing this thing. I'm like, yo, dude, just release, and he just like melted into his release, and the knife just went like butter through the thing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, whoa. Like that, do that when you're cooking from now on. Oh, okay. You know, and it was just like, that's the point, right? That kind of leaking into your life is really, really the whole point of it. And if it's not doing that, um, stuff is fun to do for the sake of doing it. But you know, get the idea on the same page as the reality. There, if the idea is you're cultivating, so it's going to improve your relationship with life, then check the reality that that's actually happening. And if not, you may need to adjust some stuff.
Absolutely. And I think this is I sort of alluded earlier to the thing of like a renunciate path or a path of being in the world. And if we're talking about the Daoist stuff, the part that was primarily a in the world path. And the thing that went alongside it was the martial arts. So they're all martial arts. And I don't feel I can say I'm a martial artist, but I definitely intentionally cultivate a sort of martial artist's perspective on life and things. And I think that is one of the things that should go with that needs to be done alongside all of this if you're not living in a cave, is seeing life as a path of mastery that
Yeah.
practices.
Nice. I've started to think of it as, how do you relate to pressure?
Yeah.
You know, life puts pressure on you. Social situations put pressure on you. Family puts pressure on you. Financial obligations put pressure on you. Stupid government decisions put pressure on you. How do you deal with that pressure, right? And the internal arts are so nice because you practice from internally first. You put pressure on yourself and you go, oh, that's interesting. What if I release that? And you learn to release the internal pressure, which is all nice in solo practice. Then you have partner work where someone else puts pressure on you. Maybe it's light, easy to deal with pressure. Can you deal with that in with this song idea, right? This meeting of unifying with it rather than going into fight or flight about it.
Totally.
And if then you start to see your whole practice, cultivation practice is, how do I deal with pressure? Then suddenly, like, your boss puts pressure. Oh, what do I do? Oh, that's right. I practice this open release, or and you organize around that pressure in a very natural way, or you know, whatever the pressure may be. And I find I don't train martial arts in the fact that I don't get into fights where the intent is to harm. Because when that intent is there, adrenaline comes and it's a whole different story. And at this point in time, I just haven't had an experience, and I don't know what would happen. Um, is the honest answer. But what I have trained a lot is dealing with pressure, and dealing with pressure that's like slowly increasing. You know, I get some of my friends who can drop bombs on me, and it's like suddenly all my flight comes back, right? It's like, oh, what happened to all the nice release that was there 2 minutes ago on my thing? And it's like starting to identify the pressures that might just be invented in my head because, you know, my friend's not trying to hurt me. Is there something responding to the situation as if he is? Can I find that part of my mind? Can I release that so it organizes? And then the system goes, oh, and as the pressure increases, you know, you're getting into hard sparring and people are getting a bit carried away with it and a bit giddy, you know, and it's like landing some good hits and maybe you get a blood lip or something because, you know, something's loaded up and it springs all of a sudden. Then it's like, how do you deal with that pressure? Do you revert back to fight or flight, or do you keep cultivating this thing we're cultivating? This path of union with the pressure. So I don't have to keep the pressure out. I can actually go, yes, embrace that pressure, and then if it's accepted as a part of my experience, then it allows the whole rest of the experience, the unconscious and everything, to kind of organize around that pressure in an intelligent way. And it's been fascinating, like, as that's tapped into, I can be like in the middle of getting wailed on landing hits, and suddenly it's just like total acceptance and boom, and like the hits bounce off me, and I just get deeply relaxed and my hands go into the right position. I can find the space without even thinking about it. And then it's like, oh, back into fight or flight. And, so I find the martial concepts, at least, and the martial context really useful for training this pressure thing. But more interesting in that is like, okay, people aren't wailing on me too much, except for my friends who I asked to do it for training purposes. What happens if I know, dealing with an unruly person in the street? Can I deal with their pressure in the same way? People I don't have a normal job anymore, so my job's nice. But, you know, my students, I'm like, you're getting pressured from your boss. Use your qualities, practice taking that psychological pressure and releasing under it, and opening it and connecting to it and all the rest. And that emotional pressure, and, especially in COVID, because the pressure was insane in COVID, like all this pressure to do, whatever, mask, no mask, vaccinate, not vaccinate, whatever it was. All of it was pressure, right? At its root. Can you meet that pressure and release to organize around it, which actually takes the whole if X then Y out of it, because it changes on the context. And if in some situation the pressure might be like, ooh, when I just put my mask on, it diffuses the whole thing. Or, oh no, taking a stand at the moment, holding my position, right? Keep it off, whatever, whatever your beliefs around that may be. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. It's just like you actually lose that sense of if X then Y when you can orient around pressure by uniting with it and letting the system release and open with it, rather than having to go to war with it, right? Either by running and just going, yes, I'll do what you say, or standing up to it. No, I'm going to go against you. Like this kind of in between option of uniting with it, and a lot of possibilities open up from within that. So yeah, the martial stuff's the non-fighting part of the martial stuff, I think, is useful for everyone.
Yes.
Not in the context of go out and get in a fight with someone who actually wants to tear your head off. Hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone. You never know these days, things are accelerating, but in Australia, at least, the chances of that right now are, yeah, just non-existent for us. We it's not like London where you might get shanked by a 13-year-old with a Stanley knife. It's not going to happen here. We're reasonably safe, so we don't have to deal with that, thankfully, which gives us more time to practice against varying levels of pressure, right? Um, and if you keep cultivating this and keep playing with the increased pressure, if you're not a martial artist, strap on some gloves, go find a boxing friend to just wail on you a bit and see if your qualities hang around. Even if you're not going to get good at fighting, you can play with that level. Where's my cultivation at? What level of pressure can I handle with the skills that and qualities that I've cultivated? Can I keep my alert, calm mind that I found in my meditation while someone's just really like trying to go to town on me, even if they're a nice someone?
Yeah, totally. I think there's one of the, I'll throw one more idea at you is, one of the key sort of things that I think is, it is a foundation in these arts, but it's a really high end thing to be able to achieve. And that is, it's something to do with, changing the way the sympathetic nervous system functions, changing the way that that fight or flight response is triggered. Um, and there's all these theories. There's theory in the Daoist system around, when this channel opens, then the parasympathetic nervous system is more dominant. And when this opens, then the sympathetic can regulate more effectively. But for me, one of the things that I experience in that, which is changing how in applying what you're talking about of changing how I relate to pressure, is that if I am reactive to the pressure, or even responsive in a way that isn't a release, but yeah, if I'm reacting to it or responding to it, it triggers a frame of viewing it and an emotional pattern that is sort of the habit of who I am as a person, and means that then the lens through which I have that experience, it just reinforces who I am. And either I'll have a negative experience that reinforces my perspective, or a positive one that reinforces my perspective. And as I slowly make progress on this foundational quality of regulating sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and being able to not tense up around pressure, what I'm finding is a greater emotional range for the experience of reality starts to arise. So when I'm at my worst and not doing this, my defaults are like kind of like apathetic anxiety and smugness and confidence. That would be my emotional range, like literally just those two things. And either I'm smug and confident, or I'm anxious. And so in that, the typical way that have responded to pressure through my life is probably one of those two defaults. And the conditioned way of responding to pressure is one of those gets triggered and I become anxious about it, or I, stick my chest out to it or something. Through these arts, it releases the structures that are in the mind and in the body to be able to give actual new and novel responses to life scenarios. And I think that's also, you're talking about how the leaking, the bleeding in of the cultivation into life is one of the one of the things you love about it, one of the reasons why you do it. For me too, and in this way of opening up a greater range for experience. Like I remember when I was younger, I used to have these experience and these vibes around things that were happening that were vast and interesting, and that faded as I grew older. And then through the practice, that's opening back up. And I find that to be one of the things that I find most enjoyable and rewarding about it is that is like a becoming the experience of life being able to be much more nuanced on an emotional level, on a sort of experiential level.
Yeah, kind of like a willingness to experience more things, right?
Well, I mean, the willingness is one thing, but the system having been realigned so that it does, because that experience does not come from anything I do mentally. That's a side effect of the practice of suddenly it's, it seems to go through waves. And if I do a period of intense practice and it goes well, then there'll be a period where suddenly my lens for reality is clearer and everything is richer, and then that stabilizes, and there's another level with it. But it for me, that arises from the causes of the practices leading to effects which become inherent conditions that are then there with time. This is
which takes us right back to where we started, and I think is a nice place to end. Thanks, Jackson. It has been fun, and I'll definitely get you on here again at some point. We can geek out about whatever we are working on at that point in time. But just to finish up, I don't know if you have any kind of like online presence. I think you've just keep your blog back off, and
yeah, it ebbs and it flows. I think there's a website, there's artwork that can be purchased.
oh yes, your artwork. I'll definitely throw all the links to all that stuff in the show notes. So maybe just do a quick plug of it now, and then we'll
Just Instagram. Hit up the Instagram. Everything else is linked to that. So Jackson at Instagram. Yeah.
Jackson. Sorry.
Collings.
Cool.
I think it's just my name. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I'll throw the direct link to that in the show notes too, so people can click on something instead of having to work out how that's spelled. Yeah, thanks, man. So good to connect. So lovely to have you on. I'm really looking forward to letting this out into the public and hearing our geekery go far and wide. And it's inspired me to chase up Neil too, which I'll definitely do at some point soon. I'm sure he'll be willing. I'm going to send this podcast to him so he hears us talking about getting him on here, and hopefully hopefully accepts. Yeah, so I appreciate your time, man, and your insights. There are a few things there that have actually landed quite nicely, and I can feel them all bubbling in the background. Particularly that last bit about the emotional diversity. Something went whoop and got thrown into the unconscious as it does. So I'll let that digest and simmer away and let you know what happens. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I think let's call it there.